Hi, I'm Cass Turnbull. I'm with Plant Amnesty, which is the world's only nonprofit to end bad pruning, or as we like to say, to end the senseless torture and mutilation of trees and shrubs caused by malpruning. And it's really bad out there. Probably 90% of the pruning that goes on in the world is just cutting, and that includes by professionals. Over the course of this video, we're going to identify some of the most common problems that landscapers make, how to correct them. We're going to transform this landscape, which belongs to Bridgehaven, a local Seattle condominium complex, as proof that you can switch from a landscape which is all done the old-fashioned, unsustainable way into a healthier, lower maintenance, and more beautiful landscape done the right way. So this is primarily for landscapers and gardeners, people in the profession. Other people might benefit from watching this. And landscapers, even ones who've been doing it for 20 years, may find value in seeing the alternative way that things can be done, the things that more residents of places like Bridgehaven are going to be asking you for. When you're dealing with a project of this size, you want to walk around the place at least a couple of times and imagine how it should look and look at each section separately. The first order of business is to take out the plants that you know are going to need to go. Those are dead plants, plants in the wrong place, plants that are interfering with the sidewalks. Then you're going to want to prune the things that you can prune, especially the deadwooding. And then you want to do bed enlarging, transplanting. After you add the soil, then you do the transplanting. Then you add the new plants, usually the lower story plants. And after all that is done, of course, you sterco or mulch to make it perfect. So this landscape is planning for the future. With the radical renovation and some of the wide spaces between plants, it might look unfinished, but you're going to need to do that so that when it fills in, it won't need to be constantly hacked and sheared. We got to break a couple eggs to make an omelet, and finally we will have the breakfast of our desire. Sorry, I got corny. When we're working on a big project like this, a lot of plants, a lot of things to do, I like to start out with a walk through the entire area, and I tag the things that I know are going to need to be either pruned, moved, or killed. I even put a little instruction on that for the grounds crew when they show up. And then it helps you visualize how things are going to look like after those things have happened, and more ideas will occur to you. This is bed 1 outside the cabana next to the pool. We took out a bunch of dying heathers that were looking pretty bad. And then we had this big empty spot. So we put in some good soil because the soil all through here is crap. And we're going to put new plants in here. They need good fluffy soil. We found these shrubs we had to take out from another bed because they were crowding one of the main plants. The main stars of the show was getting crowded by these potentillas that were competing for viewing of it. So we killed 2 birds with 1 stone. We dug them up and we moved them to here. And it's really nice to use plants from the landscape that you're renovating because they match the age of the other plants. Rather than just getting new plants, it never looks right if you take out a full-size plant and put in a little bitty baby. It doesn't match the rest of the landscape. But these are already big, they're already mature like the rest of the landscape. And we sited them in a straight row and we watered them right away because they were almost bare root. There wasn't a lot of dirt. So that it's important to get them in the ground almost instantly watered. A lot of people will let their plants sit out in the sun while they're digging the hole, get that hole dug first, get the hose ready right away, have it ready to go when you put the plant in, and soak it. Don't spritz it, but soak it to make sure that it's going to live. So Susie Thompson, Susie's landscape design, Susie's design.
Susie Landscape Design.
Susie's Landscape Design is our on-the-fly designer here. We decided that we needed all lower story plants to fill in, and she's going to position them first and imagine how they're going to look when they grow up.
Okay.
You can just go ahead and do it.
Okay. We've got grasses, perennials, and ground cover.
Grasses, perennials, and ground covers.
Okay.
And we're going to put them where we think they're going to be, and then we're going to stand back and look at them and shuffle them all around until we get it exactly right.
That's right.
So Susie put these nandinas with some pink and orange tints on them to match the nandina on the other side, and to separate this part of the bed from this part of the bed. We don't really like this sheared bush, but we can't unshear it at this point. And it's also evergreen. We've got the volunteer contingent here today, and we're also removing sod, making the beds larger, at least to the drip line. And this is one way to do it, where you dig up the sod, toss it into your wheelbarrow, and that way it's a lot lighter. Another way to do it is to take all the dirt with it. It's faster that way. And another nice thing to do with this is to compost it on site. It turns into beautiful, wonderful dirt. You can see where the line was made by the hose first, so we know where it's going. We got to here, and this is to prevent something horrible from happening, like this. This horrible, horrible, awful cut on this wonderful plant. So this wants to extend clear out to here, and instead of enlarging the bed, they've been whacking back the plant. And thank God it's this plant, because it can take it. But you do this to many other kinds of plants, they'll die. So this bed has a whole lot of struggling rhododendrons because they were in too much sun. They've made it this far, but they don't look particularly healthy. And they're also competing with the star attraction in this bed, which is the weeping blue outlet cedar. They just don't look quite right. So we're going to move them into the big empty bed in the shade and fill this area in with lower story plants. You'll notice that the first thing they did was dig a trench around it. They just don't start by jamming your shovel in and prying up, which is what a lot of people do when they're first learning to transplant, because that cracks the root ball, makes it much less likely to survive. So you make this little work area. It's a trench, and then when you dig, you can put your shovel down low enough to drag the soil out. And you go around and around and around in a circle, each time digging a little farther under the root ball. So one guy's going to pull the rhododendron towards him gently, oh, it's not ready yet. Not ready yet, but yeah, show him how you continue to dig under the root ball without cracking the root ball. And then when you've gone around 3 times, always getting farther and farther below, you sit in the hole like Keith was and pull it gently towards you, and it should start to tilt up. You shovel and chisel away at the bottom of the root ball until it's completely free.
You have to create a void back here, or it's not going to go anywhere.
Good point. He's saying if you don't have a big hole on one side, there's no way you can rock it out. So there has to be a big void. You also use loppers to cut roots when they get in your way that are too big. He's using not a mattock, but a Pulaski, which was invented for fire prevention work. Stop your fire line. And you put on your miner's helmet. You don't thrash around, you just keep working and working and working. And don't exhaust yourself, just keep working, slowly getting farther and farther under the root ball. Homeowners are very nervous about their Japanese laceleaf maples because they're worth a lot of money, and if you prune them wrong, you destroy them. The most common mistake is just to shear the bottom off like a haircut, or to try and keep the Japanese maple down or in, or a perfect globe. And we don't want to do that. We want it to look more like a waterfall. And you spend most of your time inside. 90% of your work is just taking out deadwood. Here's Pete, and he's just detailing little tiny bits of deadwood with what's called thumb pruning. You can just snap out little teeny twigs. The bigger things, you're going to need a really good pair of hand pruners, bypass hand pruners, and a really sharp saw, because Japanese maples are pretty delicate. Not only do you take out the dead wood, you comb out all the dead leaves. There'll be a ton of that inside all your Japanese laceleaf maples. Then you take out the dead wood. Don't worry about the crossing rubbing branches, because crossing rubbing branches is what Japanese laceleaf maples do. But you do sort of want to separate the layers and make it look like a veil that you can see through to the bones of the plant. About how long would you say it takes to prune one that hasn't been pruned for, what, 15 years, 10 years?
At least a few hours.
At least a few hours, if not more. This size, you get bigger, it can take even more.
You can be in here for a day.
Then you'll be here for a day. But you won't have to do it for a day every year. You will have to touch it up every year for about an hour. It's my guess. So this is what it looks like when you're pruning Japanese laceleaf maple the right way. That's from the inside up in a roughly spiral fashion. Sometimes you have to crawl in like a car mechanic on your back and then prune your way up and out. But you don't want to strip the branches. There needs to be side branches all along. At the very end, you're going to want to get the skirt up out of the mud. And also the very last thing you do is finish the top so that it isn't quite as thick, but there should be no bare major branches showing. There should be this veil of leaves, just fewer of them on the top. Once you start learning how to garden the real way, your first thing you learn to hate is shear junipers. These nice tight buns that some people love are really very unhealthy. They get a lot of juniper blight, and they're considered kind of 1950s tacky. This one's just going to have to keep being sheared because it's right next to the walkway. We can't let it grow out of this arrangement. We're going to make it look better just by taking off some of the dead wood at the base. And when you shear into the edge of your juniper, you get a whole bunch of dead twigs that will never, ever green back up. So our job is to go in and take out all of that dead twiggage to make it look clean, if not beautiful. And never, ever, ever shear a juniper into the dead zone. It's one of the ugliest things you can do. And everybody remembers what it's like to deadwood a juniper. It hurts when you do it. It hurts later when you get in the shower and you get a juniper rash. This was an enormous laurel hedge blob right next to the walkway and was quite imposing and threatening to the people walking down this walkway. And it had been sheared for many, many years. That's okay with a laurel, but it had gotten finally just too big. So we radically renovated it by whacking it way back. And in fact, we should whack it some more so that we have some space. This will all flush back out green in the spring. It'll send up new shoots to here. We want to shear it again. Then it will grow a bit bigger and the whole process starts over. Looks horrible now, but this is a necessary way to give it a second life. So this is a Photinia. We're also going to bring it way, way back. But when we do so, we want to give it a good structure, which means to say shorter on the outsides, coming to a peak in the middle. And when the branches are thin, we cut them farther back than the branches that are thick. Why? Because it comes back better that way. It looks more natural. So this is a preliminary cut just to get the giant green ball off of this. And we can start with a new framework. We're going to cut the branches on the outside deeper to about there, a little bit higher in the middle, and the bigger branches get cut lower, or get cut higher than the skinnier branches get cut a little bit lower. And you want uneven cuts so that it flushes back and looks natural instead of like yet another ball. When you do a renovation project and you're taking a lot of shrubs down, what you're left with is what used to be hidden by it, and that looks pretty bad. And you want to clean that up just so the homeowners aren't too upset by what you did. It doesn't look so bad. Most of that's just using your hands to get all the crud, the dead needles and crud out. I spend a lot of time petting plants. And then you very meticulously take out the little dead twigs. We've done that to a couple of these, clear down to the bottom. If you know what you're doing in gardening and landscaping, you spend a lot of time at the base of plants cleaning them up. I don't know why that makes them look so much better, but it does. When I say cleaning out the base of shrubs, I mean you go right down to where it meets the ground, take out any little bits of dead wood. Here I'm checking to see if that's dead. Obviously is, it's snapped out. I'm going to take out any of this debris that is collected in here, any weeds that are down here. Believe it or not, most of the pruning people think they want is really dead, is really weeding is what needs to happen. People don't dig their plants out enough. Not only is this healthier, but it always makes things look great. You always want to prune from up here. That's not where the action is. The action is down here at the base. Not obvious to the logical mind. That's the process. And work your way up and around. So much of the time people want to prune at the top, they want to bring it in on the sides, and really it's much more important to clean up the inside and the lower part. That's what's going to make your shrub look good. Not the squaring it, not the smoothing it, but the cleaning it up. This is another bed at Bridgehaven, big one. It was pretty much empty to begin with. A lot of plants had died because of some water problems I had, some drainage problems. There were several dead plants. We took those out. Then we added soil because the soil that was here was very compacted and rooty. We added the new soil in. Then we are placing rhododendrons that we have dug up from elsewhere where we think they're going to go. Once we have them all set out, we're going to rejudge if they're going to look right there, put them in their final positions, dig a hole, and then fill that hole in and water it right away. The most important thing you can do is soak your new transplant. So we had a giant juniper here that had been sheared for 100 years. People couldn't get by on this path. We yanked it out, no way to rehab it. And now we have this great big empty bed with just a bunch of roots from the nearby tree. Almost impossible to dig in. So we're going to add some soil. We found a couple of shrubs that will actually tolerate this difficult condition, which is to say under a tree, a lot of roots, not much irrigation. And we're also going to put in some small reblooming perennials to brighten it up with some flowers. And they're easy because they only take a little bit of space to dig in to get them going, as opposed to putting another huge shrub in here. After deadwooding, this pieris looks great. We took out all the little tiny dead twigs. It took about 15 minutes. It's a different pace than when you're mowing and blowing and edging. You just settle down, get out your hand pruner, take out every tiny dead twig. You won't have to do this every year or every week, once every 5 to 10 years. And the homeowner came out and said he didn't realize how beautiful this plant was until we deadwooded it. Little dead twigs everywhere. Sometimes you can just snap them out with your hands. Don't leave stubs. Deadwooding always makes things look better. When in doubt, deadwood. You can't go wrong with deadwooding. So a lot of our work at Plant Amnesty is to unshear shrubs. The landscape industry is guilty of shearing everything in sight. It's a major form of malpruning that we try to correct. Once you have a sheared shrub, how to undo it is the question. And I'm going to unshear this shrub and get it back to its normal shape, and then thereafter we will selectively prune it with the grab and snip technique, known to gardeners and landscapers everywhere. So I'm going to try and get rid of the entire squareness, get it rounded down, and I'm going to do that by taking out big chunks on the edges. I don't even look that close on a fine leaf plant like this, and sometimes it's going to look worse before it looks better. That's one of the reasons why people don't unshear things, is you have this intermediate phase where it doesn't look as good. But I want all these big, a lot of these big chunks taken out. And I want it to be higher in the middle than the edges. And this is going to take me about, oh, and another thing is you want to loosen up the base. Oh, look at that, it's just all crowded. Sometimes you just put your hand and rustle around, see where the most congestion is. Take a cut off of that. Try not to open a hole. So imagine me doing this to the whole shrub, all over. Then it'll flush back out in a more natural shape and be kind of a fluffy bush instead of a tight bush. Then thereafter you can selective prune it. Instead of having to prune it 3 times a year, you can prune it maybe once every 4 years, saving yourself an incredible amount of maintenance. Shearing shrubs, it's a huge common mistake. People see other people do it, they figure that looks tidy. They figure that's what pruning is. It's exactly what pruning is not. Good for your formal hedges and real topiary, but you should not be doing it to every plant in the landscape because it makes for diseases. It makes for high maintenance. You have to do it all the time to stop it from having water sprouts. And if it's a flowering plant, you start losing the flower show, because you shear them off. If you're selective pruning, it doesn't matter what time you prune, you will always have flowers. And that's it for unshearing your shrubs. So this is the right way to rehabilitate a previously sheared shrub. You don't want a solid, you don't want it to be a square. You want to get rid of that totally even plane. And none of these twigs touch each other. They're sort of been stopped from crossing each other. There's space in between them. They're at different levels. The outside's lower than the top. I like it. Kudos. Got it. So the guys are going to put it in the hole. Make sure it's at the right level, the same level as the dirt that it's going into. Bury it. Sometimes it takes a moment to spin it so that it's facing exactly the right way.
Yeah, let's
And
turn it counterclockwise. There you go.
There you go.
Right there. Yeah.
So that it looks best for the people walking by. Get that dirt in there. It's pretty fast. And the most important thing, once again, is to water it right away. Think of a fish out of water. The sooner you water it, the better chance it's going to have to live. Another old adage is stomp, then water, never water, then stomp. You'll turn it into concrete. Those hair roots are just drinking that stuff up. You got dead hair roots, you got a dead plant.
Bad hair root day.
Typically when landscapers come on a weedy bed, what they'll do is they'll either use a rake or a scuffle hoe like this to get out the weeds and cut them off at the surface. What that does is it stirs up the dirt and it brings more weed seeds to the top. So it might look like you're killing the weeds that are there, but in fact you're just creating more of a problem. Plus, if you already have mulch on your bed, whether that's bark or fertile mulch or steer coat, it's going to stir up the dirt into that, and so your mulch layer won't work anymore. The best way to weed is to just get down on your hands and knees and to pull out the weeds as you see them. If you have a bed that is absolutely covered with weeds, it's probably best to come in, get all those weeds out, and then put mulch down on top of that again. You're not going to win by coming in and pulling. But you can see with this bed, there's maybe 20 weeds, and so all we have to do is pull those. When you pull like that, it doesn't disturb much of the surface, so we're not stirring up a lot of new weed seeds. And it's very important when you weed that you pull away the plants that already have seeds or flowers on them. If all I did was drop these on the ground, particularly in the fall or in the spring when the rains are still coming, all I'm doing is planting more weeds right there. So you really want to haul away anything that has seeds or flowers on it.
So this is sort of in between fall and winter. It's half defoliated, but that's natural. But you can see, even in the summer and especially in the winter, the beautiful structure now. You can kind of see through it. You can see what's called the bones. It's like a veil. Pete did a beautiful job. Next spring it'll refoliate, but even then it'll look open and lacy. Throughout this property, there was overgrown shrubs coming over the walkways, impeding traffic and making people feel quite pinched in. We've removed a lot of them completely. Some of them were just cutting back. So we're gonna keep this Cotoneaster probably as a sheared shrub. It doesn't work half bad that way, but it was way out over the sidewalk. So we have to renovate it by cutting it way, way back, getting the ivy out, and cutting off the things especially that are on the ground. Then we'll let it flush back out green and then start shearing it again. This shrub has also been sheared. It's an evergreen azalea and it costs a lot of money to keep these straight shoots coming off. We want to return it to its natural shape so we don't have to keep pruning it 2 or 3 times a year. We're going to do that by unshearing it. I'm going to find a piece that sticks out too long and hide the cut down inside. Usually where it meets up with the side branch and break up the solid outer line. I'll spend some time, probably half hour, maybe an hour doing this, but then I won't have to prune it again for 2 or 3 years. While I'm in here, I'm taking out all the deadwood, of which there is a great deal because it has been sheared before. This is a volunteer holly shrub. It just seeded itself in. We don't want it. It's going to get to be huge and crowd all these desirable plants. If you just cut it to the ground to try and kill it, it'll grow back in, a year or 2. So we're going to cut it and kill it with straight Roundup by cutting it to the ground and then painting the cut stem. The other way to handle this would be to dig it out completely by hand. If you have a larger plant than this comes in really handy, the cut and paint system, and it can save you a lot of time. You want to cut not too close to the ground, not too high up, about an inch or two off the ground, because once soil touches the Roundup, it's inactivated. If you cut too low, you're almost for sure going to inactivate it. If you cut too high, it won't work. Hollywood. So I use this little paint bottle. It has a brush in it, and within 1 minute I paint the cut stem with concentrated Roundup. And if it doesn't rain and it doesn't get dirty, it will get sucked into the root system and kill just this plant. Doesn't spread to anything else, doesn't kill anything else, and I can plant in this soil 2 days from now. Things will be just fine. Next year I'll come back and cut the stub off completely to the ground level. So this is a sheared Ilex crenata Japanese holly, and we want to return it to its natural shape, and we're going to do that by cutting it way low. It's going to look just like butchery, but next year it's going to flush back out green and soft and natural, and then after that we're going to selective prune it to keep it in good shape. It's going to cost a lot less than shearing this 3 times a year. You want to work on that side, I'll work on this side. We're just doing it. Excellent. It's nice to have it a little bit lower on the outside so it rounds down. And you kind of clean it up so the people know you didn't hate it. You didn't prune it this way because you wanted it to die. The old round down on the edges. Okay, so this is about half the size it will wind up being. I decide how big I want it, cut a little bit lower by a foot or two. And I want to round down the edges so it looks natural. While I'm in here, I take out any weeds, pop cans, or cigarette butts. Old leaves that people kept blowing in here. And sometimes it's nice to take off lower branches so that you can get into get the weeds and things.
Are we gonna cut these ones down more or not?
Oh, it doesn't matter. We could. It'd be nice. It'd probably look better. This guy needs to get cut. Believe it or not, this time next year it's going to be a thing of beauty. Well, as much as the Ilex crenata can be a thing of beauty. really just a small leafed green ball. Okay, looking good. A lot of times people start to shear their shrubs when they meet the edge of the bed, and you get this straight wall effect, which is not pretty, and it's again high maintenance. So what we're going to do here is enlarge the bed to meet the shrub instead of the other way around. First thing I do is I lay out a hose in pretty much the shape I'm going to want the bed. This has been kicked aside. After that, you follow it with your half moon edger and dig down and pry back to make a whole line, the real line of the bed. After that, about a foot farther in, you make a second line and you cross hatch it, sort of like a railroad track. The purpose is to get little brownie squares of sod that you can pull out. And you do that with a spading fork and hopefully with a lot of good muscle on hand. Then we're going to tip back the parts that look funny on the outside and let it grow to the bed edge.
And then lift them out.
This is the proper tool for lifting out. It's called a spading fork. Little brownie squares. So we've made the bed using our hose. We're digging it out with a half moon edger and the spading fork. This whole area was full of dead pyramidalis shrubs. They won't grow back after they're cut to the ground, well, because they're dead. And also we want to hide the fact that we're leaving this dead, ugly stump. We're going to do that using one of the tricks of the trade, which is to use just a little bit of dirt to rub over the stump so it doesn't look like somebody just now cut it down. We did a radical renovation on this Viburnum davidi, but we don't want it to grow back to be a wall along the sidewalk again. So we want to bring this leading edge farther back so that it feathers back to a high point in the middle of the bed instead of ending like a wall right there. We took out a giant gob of ivy that was covering over this pretty nice stump. We like it. We're thinking maybe it could be part of a focal point or an ornamental feature in this landscape. Haven't quite decided. We'll see what the owners of the property think. If we do keep it, we'll probably put some sword ferns around it and make it look a little bit like it's still in the woods. This bed used to have a lot of other plants in it that died. We've taken them out and we're going to bring in a new pile of dirt, spread it around and plant some new shrubs. But before we do that, we have to get rid of this leftover dead perennials. And anytime you do perennials, a good quick way to cut them out is with a bread knife that you got from the thrift store. We're getting rid of all these perennials so they don't stick up to the new soil that we're having brought in before we plant a whole new set of shrubs.
So this cedrus has been pruned repeatedly off the lawn area so the lawnmowers can get through here. But what it leaves is this wall of not very attractive looking plant. So we've thinned it out, we've taken a lot of this out, it's much more graceful. So we have the before section and the after, much more pleasing. So in a landscape like this, you have to leave space for the mowing crew. It's usually a different viewpoint as far as dealing with these types of plants. So the pruner, who is a little bit more experienced, needs to think about the lawnmower, but he also has to think about the care and beauty of the plant. So in a complex this large, our goal is to make the landscape beautiful, but a little less expensive for the owners and the folks that live here to care for it, spend less money on it. And what that means is less shearing, less time on some of these plants that don't add to their beauty. So what we're going to do in a bed like this, we have this beautiful specimen plant here, we have a nice Japanese maple, we have these shrubs that aren't that beautiful in front of them. We're going to take those out, we're going to move them out, we'll put in some nice mulch here, maybe put in some simple perennials, and it'll add beauty, it'll add depth and different sizes, and the folks that live here are going to love it, and there's going to be a lot less maintenance going on to maintain it. This area has a lot of potential. It sits in the middle of this complex. It's near the pool. Everybody's balcony looks out into this spot, and what do they see? It's not very exciting. So we need to bring in some nice color, we need to bring in some showy plants, and we'll take them from other beds where they're not needed or it's too crowded, put them in here and come up with something pretty spectacular, because we already have, again, nice specimen planting there, a nice Japanese maple. Those are the bones of the area. We just need to fill this in with some other beauty. This area right in front of me with the stone is going to be a patio. I've taken out an old one, it's going to be replaced with a new one. So around that is going to be some seasonal color. You're going to want people to come out here and use the area, not just view it from their terraces, but it's going to be very pleasing. It's going to be a centerpiece. So on this project, we have to look at many different aspects. We have to look at the trees, we have to look at the shrubs and large plantings, we have to look at the ground covers. We're trying to make this beautiful and accessible and not cost a lot of money for the guys that have to maintain it. But we're looking well into the future. So some of these plantings at the start may look a little bare. When we remove plants away from trees and so on, it's so we can show off those trees. It may look a little naked for a while, but we know that in the future, these will grow up and work well together. This beautiful ground cover here with the nice colors, it's called Photinia. It's gorgeous, but I recognize it as a garden thug. This has the potential of taking over this bed, coming up through all the shrubs. It can come up through the lawn and just keep on going. So we want this out of here. So we see something like that, someone may find it beautiful, but we know that there's trouble. So we get rid of it, make sure it's all out of the ground, the roots and everything, then we'll plant this with something that's less invasive and beautiful. This landscape has many common features. You've got the beds, the landscape beds, the trees and so on. It has something very unique. It has an urban creek flowing right through the middle of it, and that's pretty special. What you have to think about when you have this, it's not just a water feature, it's not recirculating. This is a real stream. Everything you do in this property is in the watershed to this stream. So you have to think about your fertilizers, you have to think about your weed killers. What are you planting near it? Is it invasive? Is it going to take off and create a problem down the way? So you really keep this in mind. You hope to educate the landscape crews and the people that maintaining that this is a very important feature, and they have to act accordingly because this is a treasure.
So our purpose here was to show how you can take an ordinary, sheared and improperly maintained landscape and transform it. We're actually calling it a sustainable landscape conversion. We did that over 2 days with about 30 people, 35 people, and corrected the mistakes of the past, corrected some things that won't look good for another couple of years, but we're planning for the future and for future low maintenance and good looks.